welcome back to The Blessed Life. This is week 14. I hope that you've been having a great week so far. Let me ask you a question. You know how to multiply? That's kind of what our devotional this week is going to be about. Not necessarily you multiplying, but God multiplying. So let's get right into it. Now remember, if you're on Facebook, like, comment, and just send me a message. Or if you're on YouTube, rate, comment, and subscribe. Okay, here we go. Now the book is from Hebrews, and it's from chapter 6, verse 7. Some people are like land that gets plenty of rain. The land produces a good crop for those who work it, and it receives God's blessing. The title of this is The Principle of Multiplication. Have you ever wished you could multiply your money? Well, I have wonderful news for you. God is able to do it. Of course, that shouldn't come as a surprise to us. He multiplied oil and a meal for the poor widow and her son. He multiplied the strength of outnumbered Israelite soldiers in battle after battle. And he multiplied fish and loaves on a couple of Galilean hillsides. Clearly, God is a master of multiplication. In Luke 9, we find the account of one of those miraculous multiplications, the feeding of the 5,000. When the day began to wear away, the 12 came and said to him, "Send the multitude away that they may go into the surrounding towns and country and lodge and get provisions, for we are in a deserted place here." But he said to them, "You give them something to eat." And they said, "We have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fish, unless we go and buy food for all these people." For there were about 5,000 men. Then he said to his disciples, "Make them sit down in groups of 50. And they did so, and made them all sit down. Then he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed and broke them, and gave them to the disciples to set before the multitude. So they all ate, and they were filled, and 12 baskets of leftover fragments were taken up by them, verse 12 through 17. You're probably very familiar with this story, but let's modernize and personalize it a bit. You may see some things you've never noticed before. Put yourself in the place of the disciples. You yourself as one of the 12, you're basically a member of the official Messiah search committee. That means you're trying to determine whether or not Jesus is the true Messiah. You've left your fishing boats and begun traveling with him on a nationwide speaking tour. One day, an enormous crowd gathers. You are very excited because this is the most people to ever attend one of these traveling seminars. Counting the heads of households, you come up with a figure of about 5,000 men, plus women and children. That means there were probably about 15,000 to 20,000 people gathered on the hillsides listening to Jesus. You are amazed at how far a voice can carry from the tops of the hills. He preaches all morning, and you expect him to wrap up around noon, the time everyone is used to getting out of church so that they can head to the cafeteria ahead of the Essenes and the Sadducees. Ha ha ha, right? But he doesn't. He keeps right on preaching. You think, well, he's preaching well and everyone seems to be enjoying it. We'll let him go on a little bit longer today. Then 12:30 p.m. comes and goes, and he's still preaching. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 4 o'clock all come and go, and still the prophet continues expounding on the scriptures. By 5 o'clock, you're beginning to hear from your associates. The people are hungry, and all the restaurants are going to close soon. The fact is, you're not sure whether it's really the people who are hungry or just your associates. But being pretty famished yourself, you go to Jesus. "Lord, please excuse the interruption, but some of the other disciples and I are starting to, get concerned about the people. You know how people are. I mean, they haven't eaten all day, and now the restaurants are going to close. So we were thinking that you might want to, dismiss the service." And so the Lord turns to you and matter-of-factly says, "You give them something to eat." And then he returns to his preaching. You let the implications of his words sink in. There are 15,000 to 20,000 people who are hungry, scattered among these hillsides, and the Lord tells you to give them something to eat. So you go back to the committee. Did you tell him that the people were hungry? They ask. You nod. Did you tell him that he needs to dismiss the service? You nod again. Well, is he going to dismiss the service? Not exactly, you tell them sheepishly. Not exactly, what does that mean? And did you tell them that the people need to eat? Yes. And what did he say? He said we should give them something to eat. Come again. For a minute there, I thought you said we were supposed to give them something to eat. That's what the master said. So you all fan out to see how much food you can scrounge up. 30 minutes later, you meet back up to take the inventory. Let's see, you announce to the committee. All together we have 2 fish sticks and 5 hush puppies. Basically a Long John Silver's kids meal pack. And a SpongeBob SquarePants action figure. Perfect! You, of course, draw the short straw, so you have to report back to Jesus. Excuse me, Lord. Sorry to interrupt you again. And you go on to and give him the exciting news about your food collection efforts. Now, surely he will dismiss the service, you say to yourself, looking nervously at your watch, trying to calculate how fast you'll have to walk in order to make it to the Bethsaida Pizza Hut before it closes. Then Jesus looks at you, smiles, and says, "That's great." Have the people sit down in groups of 50. Stunned, you head back to the committee. Is he going to dismiss the service? They ask when you see them coming. They sound a little irritable. Low blood sugar, you think? No. No! He wants us to have the people sit in groups of 50. Didn't you tell him that all we have to feed these 20,000 people is a Long John Silver's kids meal pack? Yes. Groups of 50. What follows would be funny if you weren't so hungry and exasperated. Have you ever watched 12 guys trying to organize 20,000 men, women, and children into groups of 50? Herding cats across Texas would be a breeze by comparison. Ultimately, you and the committee have everyone grouped as instructed. That's the first miracle of the afternoon. As you return to Jesus, you can't help but try to figure out how he's going to provide for this group. That's the tendency for all of us. We want to figure out in advance how God is going to provide for our needs. We're usually wrong. At that point, Jesus takes the fish and hush puppies, looks up towards heaven, and blesses them. Stay tuned for the food for thought.